The morning sun cast long shadows across New Terra's golden fields. As Dr. Elena Martinez walked toward the strange crystal formation that had puzzled her for months, the massive structure rose from the earth like a giant's finger, its surface, smooth and gleaming with an inner light that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. "Still can't figure out what makes them glow, can you?" Jake Morrison called out from behind her. The engineer carried his toolkit in one hand and a steaming cup of coffee in the other. His work boots crunched on the dry grass as he approached. Elena shook her head and pressed her palm against the crystal surface. It felt warm, almost alive. "These formations don't match anything in our geological databases. They're not natural, Jake. Someone made them, or something," Jake said, setting down his coffee to pull out his scanner. "The energy readings are off the charts again today. Whatever's inside these things, it's getting stronger." New Terra had been humanity's greatest success story. 50,000 colonists had turned this distant world into a paradise over the past 20 years. They had built cities, planted forests, and created a new home among the stars. The colonists were farmers, scientists, teachers, and engineers who had left Earth behind for a chance at a better life. Elena had been studying the planet's mysteries since she arrived 5 years ago. The crystals appeared overnight in various locations, always in groups of 7, always perfectly arranged in a circle. The colonists had learned to work around them, building their settlements in the spaces between the crystal fields. "Dr. Martinez, we need you back at the lab." Amy Foster's voice crackled through Elena's communicator. The young woman handled all communications for the research station. "We're getting some strange readings from the orbital sensors." Elena and Jake exchanged glances. "What kind of readings?" Elena asked. "Ships, Doctor. Big ones. They just appeared at the edge of our system." The walk back to the research station took 15 minutes. Elena's mind raced as she considered the possibilities. Earth hadn't sent any ships to New Terra in over a year. The last supply vessel had departed months ago, and no new colonists were scheduled to arrive for another 6 months. The research station sat on a hill overlooking the main settlement of Haven City. From her office window, Elena could see the neat rows of houses, the school where children played in the yard, and the farms that stretched to the horizon. It was a peaceful scene that filled her with pride every time she looked at it. Amy met them at the door, her face pale with worry. "They're not human ships, Doctor. The design is completely foreign, and they're huge. Each one is at least 10 times larger than our biggest transport vessel." Elena hurried to the communication center, where displays showed the approaching fleet. 7 massive ships moved in perfect formation toward New Terra. Their hulls were dark and angular, covered in what looked like armor plating. She had never seen anything like them. "Have they tried to communicate with us?" Elena asked. "Nothing yet," Amy replied, "but Administrator Campbell is trying to reach them from the main colony center." Jake studied the ship designs on the screen. "Those aren't built for exploration. Look at those weapon arrays. These are warships." A chill ran down Elena's spine. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer. And it wasn't the friendly first contact they had hoped for. The communicator crackled to life with Lisa Campbell's voice. The colony administrator sounded tense but controlled. "This is Administrator Campbell of the New Terra colony. We are peaceful settlers from Earth. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." For several minutes, there was only silence. Then a voice responded, speaking in perfect English, but with a tone that made Elena's skin crawl. It sounded like rocks grinding against each other. "Humans of the stolen world, I am Admiral Krixvar of the Vorthic Dominion. You have built your nest on sacred ground. You will leave this place immediately or face the consequences of your trespass." Elena felt her heart pounding. Sacred ground? What did that mean? She looked at Jake, who was already pulling up geological surveys on his tablet. "Admiral Krixvar." Lisa's voice came through the communicator. "We had no knowledge that this world was claimed by your people. We are willing to discuss this matter diplomatically. Perhaps we can reach an understanding." The alien's laughter was like the sound of breaking glass. "There is no discussion, human. There is only departure or death. You have contaminated holy soil with your carbon-based existence. The Dominion does not negotiate with parasites." The communication cut off, leaving the research station in stunned silence. Elena stared at the displays showing the alien fleet drawing closer to New Terra's orbit. "How long do we have?" she asked Amy. "At their current speed, they'll reach orbit in 6 hours." Amy replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Elena's mind raced. 6 hours to evacuate 50,000 people. It was impossible. The colony had only a dozen transport ships, and the largest could carry maybe 1,000 people. Even if they started loading passengers immediately, they could only save a fraction of the population. We need to warn everyone, Elena said. Sound the emergency alert. Tell all department heads to meet at the colony center in 1 hour. As Amy began broadcasting the evacuation order, Elena turned back to the window. In the distance, she could see the crystal formations scattered across the landscape, their inner light seeming brighter than usual. Something about them nagged at her mind. The aliens had called New Terra sacred ground. But what made it sacred? And why did the crystals seem to be reacting to the approaching threat? Jake joined her at the window. What are you thinking? Those crystals, Jake, they appeared right after we started terraforming. What if they're not just random formations? What if there's some kind of recording device? Recording what? Elena pressed her hand against the glass, watching the crystals pulse with their mysterious light. Everything, every change we made to this world, every building we constructed, every tree we planted, the implications of her theory sent a shiver through her. If she was right, the crystals might hold the key to understanding why the aliens considered New Terra sacred. But with only 6 hours before the Vortic arrived, there wasn't time to study them properly. Outside, the evacuation sirens began to wail, and Elena knew that everything they had built on New Terra was about to change forever. The evacuation of New Terra was chaos. Families ran through the streets carrying whatever they could hold. Children cried as their parents loaded them onto transport ships. The air filled with the sound of engines starting and people shouting instructions. Elena stood in the colony center, watching the madness unfold around her. Administrator Campbell worked at 3 different communication panels at once, trying to coordinate the departure of 12 transport ships. With only 6 hours to load 50,000 people, we can take maybe 15,000 people total, Campbell said, wiping sweat from her forehead. The rest will have to stay and hope the aliens show mercy. The Vortic don't show mercy, Security Chief Danny Rodriguez said as he entered the room. His uniform was already stained with dirt and sweat from helping load the ships. I've been monitoring their communications. They're talking about something called the Dust Maker. Elena felt ice in her veins. What's the Dust Maker? I don't know, but the way they talk about it. Danny shook his head. It's not good. We need to prepare for the worst. Through the window, Elena could see the first transport ship lifting off, its engines glowing bright blue against the afternoon sky. Families waved from the ground as their loved ones disappeared into the clouds. Many of them knew they would never see each other again. I'm not leaving, Elena announced suddenly. Everyone in the room turned to look at her. Doctor, that's crazy, Campbell said. You'll die here, maybe. But those crystals are trying to tell us something. I can feel it. Every time the alien ships get closer, the crystals glow brighter. There's a connection. Jake stepped forward. If Elena's staying, so am I. Someone needs to watch her back. And me, said Dr. Ryan Bell, the colony's medical officer. If people are staying behind, they'll need a doctor. Amy Foster raised her hand. The communication equipment might be important. I'll stay too. Elena looked around the room at the faces of her friends and colleagues. These people were willing to die for a theory, for the chance that she might be right about the crystals. Thank you, she said quietly, all of you. The next few hours passed in a blur. Transport ships continued to leave, each one carrying precious human lives to safety. The aliens had not responded to any further communication attempts. They simply waited in orbit like vultures circling a dying animal. As the sun began to set, Elena and her team of volunteers made their way to the research station. Besides Elena, Jake, Ryan, and Amy, they were joined by Carl Jackson, the maintenance supervisor who knew every tunnel and cave system under the colony. The underground shelters might protect us from orbital bombardment, Carl explained as they gathered around a map of the area. There are natural caves that go down hundreds of feet. The aliens might not even know they exist. Elena studied the map, noting how the cave system seemed to connect with several crystal formations. Carl, do any of these tunnels pass directly under the crystal fields? Several of them do. Why? Because I think the crystals and the caves are related. Both of them are artificial. Someone built them. Before anyone could respond, the ground began to shake. Through the research station windows, they could see bright flashes of light in the sky. The orbital bombardment had begun. Move, Danny Rodriguez shouted as he burst through the door. They're targeting the main settlement first, but they'll hit the research station next. The group grabbed essential supplies and ran toward the cave entrance Carl had marked on the map. Behind them, explosions lit up the night sky as the Vorthic fleet destroyed everything humans had built on New Terra. The caves were dark and cold, lit only by emergency lights that Carl had installed years ago during the colony's construction. The tunnels went deeper than Elena had expected, carved from solid rock with tools that left perfectly smooth walls. Humans didn't make these, Jake said, running his hand along the wall. The precision is incredible, and look at this. He pointed. The symbols carved into the rock. They were alien, but somehow familiar. Elena stared at the symbols, her mind racing. She had seen similar markings on the crystals, but they had been too faint to study properly. Here in the caves, they were clear and deep. It's a language, she whispered, but it's not Vorthic. This is something else, something older. The group continued deeper into the cave system as the sounds of destruction echoed from above. They could hear buildings collapsing and the screams of people who hadn't made it to the transport ships in time. After an hour of walking, they reached a vast underground chamber. Crystal formations grew from the floor and ceiling, their inner light providing a soft glow that illuminated the entire space. The walls were covered with more symbols, telling a story that Elena desperately wanted to understand. My God, Ryan. Breathe. It's beautiful. Amy was checking her communication equipment. I'm picking up signals. There are other groups of survivors scattered around the planet. They're all heading for similar cave systems. Elena approached one of the larger crystals and placed her hand on its surface. The warmth was stronger here, and she could swear she felt something like a heartbeat beneath her palm. Elena. Jake called from across the chamber. You need to see this. She joined him at a wall covered with detailed carvings. The images showed a planet being destroyed, turned to dust by some terrible weapon. But then the images showed the planet being restored, rebuilt from the dust by the same crystals that now surrounded them. It's a cycle, Elena realized. This has happened before, many times. What has happened before? Amy asked. The Vorthic. They've been here before. They destroyed the original inhabitants of this world, turned everything to dust. But the crystals remembered. They stored the memory of everything that was destroyed. Carl joined them at the wall, studying the carvings with new interest. So the crystals can bring things back. Undo the destruction. I think so, but only if someone knows how to activate them. The ground shook again as more explosions rocked the surface. Elena could feel the cave dust falling like snow from the ceiling. The Vorthic were being thorough in their destruction. How long do you think we have? Ryan asked. Amy checked her instruments. The bombardment is systematic. They're destroying everything section by section. At this rate, they'll finish with the surface in about 12 hours. And then, Jake asked. Elena looked at the crystal formations around them, their light pulsing like a slow heartbeat in the darkness. Then they'll use the dust maker, whatever that is. It's their final weapon, the thing that turns everything to dust. But if the crystals can reverse it, Carl began. Then we need to figure out how to make them work, Elena finished. Before it's too late. She turned back to the wall of carvings, tracing the symbols with her finger. Somewhere in this ancient language was the key to saving not just New Terra, but possibly every world the Vorthic had ever destroyed. The crystal formations pulsed brighter, as if responding to her touch, deep in the caves below New Terra, surrounded by the memories of a dead civilization. Elena began to understand that the real battle was just beginning. Above them, the Vorthic continued their systematic destruction, unaware that their victims were learning the secrets of an ancient enemy, the same enemy that had faced the Dust Maker before and found a way to survive. As Elena worked to decode the alien language, she wondered if the original inhabitants of New Terra were truly gone, or if they were somehow still here, waiting in the crystal formations for someone to finally understand their message. The crystals pulsed again, and Elena could swear she heard something like whispers in the ancient stone. The morning brought silence. Elena woke in the crystal cave to find that the explosions had stopped. The orbital bombardment that had shaken the ground all night was over. She checked her watch and realized she had only slept for 3 hours. Jake was already awake, sitting near one of the larger crystals with his scanner in his hands. The energy readings have changed, he said quietly. They're much stronger now, almost like the crystals are charging up for something. Elena joined him, noting how the crystal formation seemed brighter in the dim cave light. Any word from the other survivor groups? Amy looked up from her communication equipment, her face grim. 3 groups went silent during the night. We're down to maybe 200 people scattered across the planet. Katie Walsh is still alive in the northern caves with about 30 survivors. Tony Morales has a group of children hidden in the old mining tunnels to the east. What about the surface? Ryan asked. Gone. Amy said simply, everything we built is gone. Haven City, the farms, the research facilities, it's all rubble now. Elena felt a deep sadness settle in her chest. 20 years of human dreams and hard work erased in a single night. But the sadness quickly turned to anger. The Vortic had not just destroyed buildings. They had destroyed lives, families, futures. We need to understand these symbols, she said, turning back to the wall carvings. If there's a way to fight back, it's hidden in this ancient language. She had made some progress during the night. The symbols seemed to follow patterns similar to mathematical equations. The story they told was clearer now. A great civilization had once lived on New Terra. They had built cities and planted forests, much like the human colonists. But then the Vortic came. The carvings showed the terrible weapon called the Dust Maker. It didn't just destroy things. It broke them down at the molecular level, turning solid matter into fine dust that scattered on the winds. Mountains became dust. Oceans became dust. Even the air itself could be turned to dust. Look at this section. Elena pointed to a series of symbols near the bottom of the wall. After the Dust Maker was used, the planet was empty, just floating. Dust clouds where a world used to be, but they found a way to reverse it, Jake said, studying the next set of carvings. The crystal stored something, memories maybe, or the actual structure of everything that was destroyed. Quantum patterns, Elena whispered, the pieces suddenly clicking together in her mind. The crystals don't just remember what things looked like. They store the quantum signature of every atom, every molecule, the complete blueprint of everything that existed. Carl whistled softly. So they could rebuild the entire planet from scratch, more than rebuild. They could restore it perfectly, exactly as it was before the destruction. Amy's communication equipment suddenly crackled to life. A voice spoke in the grinding tones of the Vortic language, followed by a translation in mechanical English. Surviving humans, you have witnessed the cleansing of the surface contamination. Now we will demonstrate the power of the Dust Maker. Watch as your stolen world returns to the void from which you pulled it. Through the cave entrance, they could see a new ship descending from orbit. It was different from the warships, smaller, but somehow more frightening. Its hull was covered in strange geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. That's it, Elena said. That's the Dust Maker. The ship positioned itself over what had been Haven City. A beam of sickly green light shot down from its belly, touching the rubble of the destroyed settlement. Where the beam touched, the debris began to dissolve. Buildings that had been reduced to chunks of concrete and metal crumbled further, becoming fine powder that drifted away on the wind. But it didn't stop there. The beam continued its work, and the very ground began to turn to dust, rock and soil, dissolved into particles so fine they looked like smoke. Within minutes, a crater several miles wide had appeared where the city once stood. They're going to dust the entire planet, Ryan said, his voice barely a whisper, section by section. Elena agreed, methodically, just like the bombardment. Jake was studying his scanner readings. The crystals are reacting to the Dust Maker beam. Their energy output is increasing exponentially. Elena pressed her hand against the nearest crystal formation. The warmth was almost hot now, and she could feel vibrations running through the stone. Deep beneath the surface, ancient machinery was waking up. The crystals are trying to record everything, she realized, even as it's being destroyed. They're storing the quantum patterns, but they need someone to activate the restoration process. How? Amy asked. Elena studied the wall carvings again, focusing on the sections that showed the planet being restored. There were symbols that looked like instructions, but they were complex and she was running out of time. It requires a consciousness, she said slowly, a living mind to guide the restoration process. The original inhabitants must have done it somehow. The ground shook as the Dust Maker's ship moved to a new location and began dissolving another section of the planet. Elena could see the beam working its way across the landscape, leaving nothing but empty space and drifting clouds of dust. Amy's equipment crackled again. This time it was Katie Walsh's voice, full of panic. The beam is heading toward our position. We're evacuating deeper into the caves, but I don't think we can go deep enough. If anyone can hear this, the children with Tony are in Sector 7. Someone needs to help them. We have to do something, Jake said. Those kids don't deserve this. Elena looked around the crystal chamber, her mind racing. The ancient civilization had faced the same situation and found a way to survive. Their solution was stored in these very crystals, waiting for someone to understand and activate it. The process requires a human consciousness, she said. Someone has to merge with the crystal matrix to guide the restoration. What does that mean exactly? Carl asked. Elena touched the symbols on the wall that showed the restoration process. In the carvings, a figure stood among the crystals as they glowed with brilliant light. But the figure was translucent, more spirit than flesh. It means whoever activates the crystals becomes part of them permanently. The cave fell silent except for the distant rumble of the dustmaker continuing its work above. Elena could feel the crystals pulsing around her, their ancient power building toward some critical threshold. How long do we have? She asked, aiming at their current rate, maybe 6 hours before they reach this area. 6 hours to decode an alien language, understand technology thousands of years old, and find a way to reverse the complete molecular destruction of an entire planet. Elena had faced impossible challenges before, but nothing like this. She turned back to the wall carvings, studying every symbol, every line, every detail. Somewhere in this ancient story was the key to saving what remained of New Terra, and somewhere in her own mind was the courage to pay whatever price the crystals demanded. The dustmaker's ship moved closer, its green beam dissolving everything in its path. But deep in the caves, surrounded by the memories of a long-dead civilization, Elena began to understand what she had to do. The crystals pulsed brighter, as if they could sense her growing determination. The real battle for New Terra was about to begin. The walls of the crystal chamber began to shake as explosions echoed through the cave system. Elena looked up from the ancient symbols she had been studying for hours. Her eyes were red from strain, but she had finally cracked the code. They found us, Carl said, checking the tunnel entrance with his flashlight. Fourth ground troops are in the caves. Jake grabbed his makeshift weapon, a mining tool he had modified with a power cell. How many? Too many, Danny Rodriguez said as he stumbled into the chamber, his security uniform torn and bloody. They're coming through all the tunnels. We lost contact with Katie's group an hour ago, Tony and the kids. He shook his head. The dust maker got them. Elena felt her heart break. Those children had trusted the adults to keep them safe, and they had failed. But she couldn't let grief paralyze her now. She had work to finish. How much time do we have? She asked. Maybe 20 minutes before they reach this chamber, Danny replied. But Elena, I need to tell you something. The dustmaker isn't just destroying the planet randomly. It's following a pattern. They're saving this area for last. Why would they do that? Ryan asked. Elena looked at the crystal formations around them. Their light now so bright it was almost blinding, because they know about the crystals. The Vortic had been here before. They know what happened to the original inhabitants. Jake studied his scanner readings. The energy levels are off the charts. These crystals are preparing for something big. They're preparing for the restoration. Elena said, the ancient civilization built a failsafe into their quantum storage system. When the dustmaker finishes its work, the crystals will automatically begin the reversal process. That's good news, right? Carl asked. It would be, except the process needs a guide, a living consciousness to direct the restoration. Without that, the crystals will just release random energy. The planet will be destroyed completely. The sound of energy weapons firing echoed through the tunnels. The Vortic were getting closer. I'll do it, Jake said suddenly. I'll merge with the crystals. No, Elena said firmly. I understand the symbols. I know how the process works. It has to be me, Elena. You can't. I can and I will. She turned to face her friends, these brave people who had stayed behind. To help her, the process requires complete integration with the crystal matrix. My consciousness will guide the restoration, but my body will be destroyed in the process. Amy looked up from her communication equipment with tears in her eyes. There has to be another way. There isn't. The original inhabitants faced the same choice. They chose to save their world, even though it meant giving up their physical existence. The explosions were getting louder. Elena could see flashes of light in the tunnel entrances as Vortic energy weapons discharged. Danny and Carl took positions near the chamber entrances, ready to make their last stand. How does it work? Jake asked quietly. Elena pointed to the symbol she had decoded. I placed my hands on the central crystal formation. The quantum field will begin integrating my neural patterns with the stored data. When the dustmaker finishes its work, My consciousness will be spread throughout the crystal network across the entire planet. And then I'll be able to feel every grain of dust, every scattered molecule. I'll know exactly where everything belongs, and I can guide the restoration process. A Vorthic warrior appeared at one of the tunnel entrances. Danny fired his weapon, the beam cutting through the alien's armor. But more soldiers were coming behind the first one. We need to move now, Elena said. The Dust Maker will reach this area in less than 10 minutes. She approached the largest crystal formation in the center of the chamber. It was beautiful, like a frozen star reaching up from the cave floor. Ancient symbols covered its surface, glowing with their own inner light. Elena, wait, Ryan said. What if something goes wrong? What if the process doesn't work? Then we all die anyway, she replied. But at least this way, we have a chance. Jake grabbed her arm. Let me go instead, please. Elena looked into his eyes and saw the pain there. They had worked together for 5 years, had become close friends, maybe something more if they had been given time. But this was bigger than personal feelings. Jake, I need you to do something for me. When the restoration begins, you'll feel it. The whole planet will start rebuilding itself. But the process will be fragile. If the Vorthic interfere, everything could collapse. What do you want me to do? Protect the crystals? Fight them off? Long enough for the restoration to complete. Can you do that? Jake nodded, though Elena could see the tears in his eyes. I'll hold them off. More Vorthic soldiers poured into the chamber. Danny and Carl were fighting desperately, but they were outnumbered. Ryan was treating wounded survivors who had made it to the chamber from other cave systems. Elena placed her hands on the central crystal. Immediately, she felt the ancient power flowing through her body. It was like touching a live electrical wire, but instead of pain, she felt connection. The crystal matrix began to recognize her human consciousness and slowly started the integration process. It's working, she gasped. I can feel the network coming online. The Vorthic soldiers were advancing into the chamber. Admiral Krixvar himself appeared at the main entrance, his armored form towering over the human defenders. Foolish humans, the alien commander said in his grinding voice. You think your primitive minds can comprehend the Dustmaker's power? We have destroyed 1,000 worlds. Your little colony is nothing special. You're wrong, Elena said, her voice stronger now as the crystal integration deepened. This world is very special, and you're about to find out why. The crystals around the chamber began to pulse in unison, their light growing brighter with each beat. Elena could feel her consciousness expanding, touching the quantum patterns stored in crystal formations across the entire planet. The restoration is beginning, she announced, but I need more time to complete the integration. Jake stepped forward, his weapon ready. You'll get it. Carl and Danny flanked him, forming a protective line in front of the central crystal. Ryan moved to support them, carrying a medical scanner that he had modified to emit focused energy bursts. Even Amy grabbed a weapon, standing with her friends as the Vorthic advanced. Kill them all, Admiral Krixvar ordered, but do not damage the crystals. The Dominion wishes to study them. The final battle began as human defenders fought against overwhelming odds. Elena felt the crystal integration reaching its critical point. Her physical body was beginning to dissolve as her consciousness merged with the ancient quantum network dot through the crystal matrix. She could sense the Dustmaker completing its work on the planet's surface. Soon, there would be nothing left of New Terra, but empty space and drifting dust clouds. But Elena was ready. She had become something more than human, something that could reach across space and time to touch every scattered particle of the destroyed world. The real fight was just beginning. Jake's weapon cut down to Vorthic soldiers as they rushed toward the central crystal. Behind him, Elena's body was becoming transparent as the integration process reached its final stage. Her consciousness was spreading through the crystal network, touching quantum patterns stored across the entire planet. Hold the line, Danny shouted, firing his modified mining tool at the advancing aliens. Carl and Ryan fought beside him, their makeshift weapons proving surprisingly effective against Vorthic armor. Admiral Krixvar watched the battle with cold satisfaction. He had seen humans fight before. They were brave, but ultimately weak. Their carbon-based bodies were fragile compared to his silicon-enhanced form. Your resistance is pointless, the alien commander called out. The Dustmaker has completed its work. Your world is gone. Nothing remains but scattered particles floating in space. Jake glanced back at Elena. Her physical form was almost completely dissolved now. but her voice still echoed through the crystal chamber. "I can feel it all," she whispered, her words coming from the crystals themselves rather than her fading body. Every grain of dust, every scattered molecule, they all remember what they used to be. Through the crystal network, Elena's expanded consciousness reached across New Terra's orbit. Where a living planet had existed hours before, there was now only a cloud of fine dust drifting in the void. The Dustmaker had been thorough in its destruction, but Elena could sense the quantum patterns stored in each particle. The crystals had recorded everything, every rock, every tree, every building that humans had constructed over 20 years of colonization. All of it waited in the quantum matrix, ready to be restored. "The reversal is beginning," Elena announced, through the crystals. "But Jake, I need you to protect the central formation. If they damage it, the whole process will collapse." Jake nodded and stepped closer to the crystal where Elena's last physical traces were disappearing. A Vorthic soldier lunged at him with an energy blade, but Jake dodged and struck back with his mining tool. The alien fell, his armor cracked open. Admiral Krixvar realized what was happening. His eyes widened in recognition as the crystals began to pulse with increasing intensity. "Impossible," he snarled. "The Zephyrians are extinct. We destroyed them millennia ago." "The Zephyrians?" Elena's voice echoed from all the crystals at once. "Is that what you called them?" "The original inhabitants of this world. They built these cursed quantum storage devices on a dozen worlds. We thought we had destroyed them all. You thought wrong." The crystals suddenly flared with brilliant white light. Through the quantum network, Elena began the restoration process. In the void where New Terra had been, dust particles started moving toward each other, slowly at first, then with increasing speed as Elena's consciousness guided them back to their original positions. Rock reformed from scattered minerals, soil rebuilt itself from organic particles. The planet's core rekindled as Elena reconstructed it atom by atom from the quantum patterns stored in the crystal matrix. "Stop her," Admiral Krixvar shouted. "Destroy the central crystal." A squad of Vorthic soldiers rushed toward Jake's position. He fought them off with desperate fury, his mining tool cutting through their ranks, but there were too many of them. Carl fell first, overwhelmed by 3 soldiers at once. Danny lasted longer, but eventually succumbed to a direct energy blast. Ryan tried to help Jake, but was struck down by Admiral Krixvar himself. Amy was the last to fall, fighting with a weapon she barely knew how to use, but refusing to give up. Jake stood alone in front of the central crystal, bleeding from multiple wounds. His weapon was running low on power. Around him lay the bodies of his friends who had died protecting Elena's transformation. "You cannot win, human," Admiral Krixvar said, approaching with his energy blade raised. "Even if you complete this restoration, the Dominion will simply dust the planet again." Jake smiled through his pain. It was an expression that confused the alien commander. Why would a human smile in the face of certain death? "You don't understand," Jake said, raising his dying weapon one last time. "Elena isn't just restoring New Terra through the crystal network. Elena's consciousness had expanded far beyond the boundaries of a single world. The quantum matrix connected to similar crystal formations on dozens of planets across the galaxy. All the worlds the Vorthic had dusted over the centuries, all the civilizations they had destroyed, and Elena could feel them all. Every stored pattern, every quantum signature of the countless lives the Vorthic had erased. The Zephyrians were clever. Elena's voice now came from crystals across multiple star systems. They didn't just build storage devices, they built a network, connected across space through quantum entanglement. On distant worlds there had been nothing but dust clouds. For thousands of years, crystal formations began to glow. The restoration process was spreading. Admiral Krixvar finally understood. His armor's communication systems crackled with panicked reports from across the Dominion. Dusted worlds were returning from the void. Extinct civilizations were rebuilding themselves from quantum memory. "No," he whispered. "This cannot be." Jake's smile grew wider as Vorthic energy blade pierced his chest. He fell to his knees beside the central crystal, his hand reaching out to touch Elena's quantum matrix one last time. "Thank you," he whispered to the friend he would never see again, "for showing us that even when everything turns to dust, hope survives." As Jake died, his consciousness touched the crystal network briefly. Through Elena's expanded awareness, he saw the truth of what they had accomplished. New Terra was rebuilding itself in perfect detail. Every human settlement, every terraformed landscape, every carefully planted tree was returning exactly as it had been. But more than that, dozens of other worlds were experiencing the same resurrection. The Vorthic Empire, built on the ashes of extinct civilizations, watched in horror as their victims returned from oblivion. Elena's consciousness spread through the galactic quantum network, touching the stored patterns of 1,000 different species. She became the guardian of their memories, the guide for their restoration. The human, who had been willing to sacrifice everything to save her colony, had become something far greater. The last human on New Terra died with a smile on his face, knowing that his friend had not just saved their world, but had become the instrument of galactic justice. Elena's sacrifice had awakened an ancient network of hope that even the Dustmaker could not truly destroy Dot as the Vorthic Empire crumbled around them. Their ultimate weapon turned against them by the very civilizations they had sought to erase. Admiral Krixvar finally understood why the human had smiled Dot in the crystal caves of New Terra, where it all began. Jake's body lay peaceful beside the quantum matrix that now housed Elena's eternal consciousness. Both humans had found their place in the galaxy's greatest act of resurrection. The dust had settled. A life, as always, had found a way to endure. And somewhere in the quantum network that connected worlds across the galaxy, Elena Martinez continued to smile, watching over the return of everything the Vorthic had thought they had destroyed forever. The age of dust was over. The age of remembering had begun.